How will the Dallas Cowboys attack the cornerback position this offseason? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast
Locked
Network, your
On.
team every day.
On. Locked on. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, today we are talking about the Cowboys cornerbacks from the 2022 season. Let's first start with Trevon Diggs. How do you think he performed in his first year after being a All-Pro nomination last year?
You know, I think in some ways Trevon had a better season than he did the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously not in the takeaway interceptions category, but I think it was, very unrealistic to expect that kind of production year in, year out from anybody. And I think that where you saw more improvement from Trevon is just a higher level of consistency, right? It was a lot of kind of feast or famine with Trevon Diggs. And honestly, I mean, it was his volume of interceptions and pass deflections and plays in the football was so high that it certainly made it worth the risk versus reward, right? Like you take 11 interceptions with versus what he produced on yardage any day of the week. Now, the problem with that is that you're not going to get 11 interceptions every year. So you need to improve the floor of your game. You need to raise the floor of your game so that you're also preventing completions, which I think was the kind of next part of this game. And I think that's where we saw a lot of improvement this year, whether it be teams afraid to throw his way because of obvious reasons, or it just being that he has kind of closed off that side of the field. I think that his coverage, on a down-to-down basis improved a ton. And I think just kind of learning to read the situation even better than he had previously, so he's not biting on a lot of these double moves and stuff. He's always going to be susceptible to that stuff there because teams are going to target him for that. But the give and take of that is that teams are also going to have to deal with the anxiety of throwing the ball to his side because he has every bit of ability to catch the football as the other team's wide receivers whenever it's up in the air.
And it's not like he didn't have any interceptions either. I mean, he still had four, which I mean, like, I'm thinking about like 4 years ago when it was so rare to get an interception. So to have a cornerback get four and be like, it's disappointing.
I mean, I remember a time when we used to look at the standings and to find a cornerback on this team that had four interceptions, like we got to sign him to a long time. You're like, imagine the year that Terrence Newman had four interceptions. It's like, oh my God, what a long-term deal incoming. Like,
I mean, listen, Terrence Newman's
a high bar.
He's one of my favorite players of all time. He had 1 year of his career where he had more than four interceptions. And I always thought, if he got to four, phenomenal year. But just to go to the numbers about like how Diggs improved, I've got him right here, courtesy of Pro Football Focus. So in 2021, teams were catching like, 66% of their targets thrown at Diggs. This year was 55%. The most impressive stuff last year, he gave up 18.7 yards per reception. This year dropped down to 12.4%. Forced incompletion rate. So basically when he has an interception or a pass deflection or a breakup, last year was 12.2%. This year, 14.9%. So across the board, he was a better corner. Didn't get the takeaways. It's a trade-off. Still, it's one of the most dangerous cornerbacks in the league. And I just thought he improved his consistency altogether.
I can't remember. God, I mean, all these games start to blend together. I can't remember what game is, but I remember, he just made plays in games that when you needed it, there was, I'm pretty sure, what was that game that I think it was a fourth down play that he basically ended the game in the red zone with a pass deflection.
It might have been against the Bengals.
Yeah. It's just, it's stuff like that. He was just very clutch when you needed him to be, made big plays, was in tight coverage. It seemed like a lot more pass deflections this year, where he's reaching in and swatting the ball away and getting in, that sort of thing. So, it's not as flashy as the interceptions last year, but I think it's more effective what you saw from Trevon Diggs this year as opposed to last year.
All right. So Trevon is the most consistent part of the secondary. Like, we just know what he is.
Yeah.
He's a ball hawking corner. Everything else is kind of up in the air, even with the play of DaRon Bland, what the Cowboys do with their 2 veteran cornerbacks, what happens with some of their other day 2 picks that they have on the roster. We're going to talk about all those guys next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything and everything from the money line to point scores and three-pointers drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Landon, I'm going to combine 2 cornerbacks together to talk about them because they're both veterans, both coming off major injuries. Anthony Brown, who's been a longtime starter on the outside for the Cowboys, scheduled to become a free agent. Jourdan Lewis entering the final year of his contract, coming off a Liz Frank injury. How did those 2 play last year? What do you expect the Cowboys to do this offseason?
I think Anthony Brown played not quite to the level that he played the year before.
I think Jourdan Lewis played better of the 2.
I think that Jourdan Lewis played much better than he did pre the 2021 season. In fact, to the point where if he hadn't got this Liz Frank injury, I almost would be interested in bringing him back, right? Like, I think you bring it back in and then you feel like you have a comfortable situation as at least you're starting 3. As it stands right now, that injury, unfortunately, at his age, for a guy that already was kind of at the threshold for speed, it's an unfortunate injury, and I don't know how well that's going to play out. I think for Brown, it's probably time to move on. He's played very good football for the Cowboys for a long time, and honestly, we should all be very grateful for it because he, was way overachieving, a 5th round pick. That just a 6th round pick, right?
6th round pick, yeah.
6th round pick, yeah. Who was able to kind of work his way into the starting lineup, get it playing time, earn a second contract, earn the contract, play really good football in 2021, really decent football last year as well. Unfortunate injury, but I think it's probably time for him to test the waters a little bit, unless you can get like a really sweetheart deal on him. But I do think that it's interesting, right? They are very tied at the hip, despite being, kind of coming from very different paths. I'm both. I hate to sentimentalize this a little bit, but I'm very proud of the way Anthony Brown and Jourdan Lewis bounced back from where they were, let's say 2 years ago, right? Because they were part of this group that had to go through all these changes and deal with all the defensive scheme system changes. And they played very poorly in 2020, and both of them bounced back in a major way in 2021. So kudos to those guys. I really do hope the best for them. On a personal level, I love Jourdan Lewis. I love following him. He's hilarious. And Anthony Brown, I don't know that I would get a Pringle tattooed on my shoulder, but I do love that he felt that need to do that. And I love that about Anthony Brown.
Both these guys have been really good players for the Cowboys for more than half a decade now, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, because Brown is a free agent coming off a torn ACL, and because Jourdan Lewis is really a slot corner coming off a Liz Frank injury, it might be best just to move on. But I won't be surprised if Jourdan Lewis is back, and that might just depend on where he's at in his rehab. The Cowboys could release him, save, I told you the number pre-show, I think it's $4.7 million. There's no guaranteed money left. I just wonder if the Cowboys will do that and potentially try to throw that money back into like Donovan Wilson and try to keep him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think like I said, I hate the business side of this, because I'd like having a guy like
Yep.
Jourdan Lewis on our team, and frankly, I like having a guy like Jourdan Lewis in that defensive backfield room, just to kind of.
Well, he's also different in the way he plays, right?
Yeah, he's a very he's not Tyrann Mathieu, but he's that kind of like slot corner, right? Where
Yep.
it's just good to have him on the field no matter what the situation is. He's very versatile. He's not a huge necessarily cover guy, but he will cover very well and a kind of a wide variety. Obviously, the legend of Jourdan Lewis is always going to start with that game he had against New Orleans, where he was able to kind of shut things down with Alvin Kamara. So. Really, it was only about 4 plays that covered Alvin Kamara, but it was 4 big plays. So I wish the best for both of those guys. I think they performed admirably for the Cowboys, and I think Cowboys fans should look at both of these guys very fondly.
All right, now let's talk about DaRon Bland, who I don't want to say saved the season for the Cowboys,
well,
but
you can make an argument.
Yeah, kind of did. Once Jourdan Lewis and Anthony Brown went down with injuries, the Cowboys were in a really rough spot. It was tough. And Bland came in, played extremely well some games, struggled in others, but for the most part, gave you competent cornerback play at 2 different positions. What are the expectations for him going forward?
I think they should be high. Look, I think this is a guy that every single time you've portioned out a little bit more. Okay, you've earned a little bit more. Here's a little bit more of a portion. Okay, you've earned that part. Here's a little bit more. And every single time you add more and more to this plate, it didn't feel like we never saw the ceiling. I think there was a point near the end of the season, probably the second to last game, where he started to feel like, okay, this is it. Like this is where I could take this as a rookie coming off of, from Fresno State, starting for the Dallas Cowboys for the last 6 games. But I mean, the fact that where that was such a high level already that you were able to rely on him as a starting corner going into the playoffs, against a dangerous offensive team like San Francisco, against a dangerous offensive team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he was able to hold his own. I think it really bodes well. And again, it's a miracle almost, right? Like you have this guy, you lose 2 corners back to back that were playing such good football at the time, and then to have these other 2 rookies underneath him, this second round and third round rookies who you throw in, they can't handle it. What are you going to do? You are saved by this true fifth round pick that you had just taken that year, comes in, is able to play inside and outside equally adeptly and allow you to kind of build your secondary, piecemeal your secondary around be a reliable rookie. I mean, to say that he saved the season, I think is not an understatement. I think the fact that he was able to come in and do what Kelvin Joseph and Nahshon Wright were not able to do and provide stability. And beyond that, again, the fact that he's able to do that at either inside or outside corner, that's what really saved the Cowboys, because it provided them the versatility to piecemeal that third corner together with a combination of Israel Mukuamu, Kelvin Joseph, Nahshon Wright, another safety, so that's really the key is not just that he was able to hold his own, but the fact that he was able to hold his own at multiple positions, it really helped the Cowboys in a major way.
So played well at the beginning of the year. That Packers game was rough for him. He just did not play well against the Packers. Christian Watson beat him a lot, whatever, it happens. From week 11 on, all right, he gave up on average 29 yards a game, and teams had a passer rating of 56.2 when targeting him in coverage. Gave up 2 touchdowns, had 4 interceptions over the final 8 games of the season. He was awesome. If you told me this was a first-round pick, like you just got blind resume, first-round pick, we would be thinking, okay, this guy has the potential to be, one of the top 10, 12 corners in the league. But I think because he's a 5th-round pick, you're always a little bit hesitant to get too excited about these kind of players. But Bland was awesome in awesome in training camp. He was awesome in preseason. Then when he came in at the second half of the year, he was awesome. I think Cowboy fans should be really, really happy and excited about his future.
This is one, I think I'm ready to call it at this point. This is one that the NFL just straight missed on. Like, you go and watch the tape. He's got really good tape. And go dive into the analytics of the pick. If you remember, I'm pretty sure he was like top 5 rated man corners coming out of this draft. Like, I mean, he struggled a little bit in zone, but I mean, as far as man coverage, which is the most difficult skill to try to teach a corner, he had it in spades coming out of college. So yeah, I think the fact that the Cowboys are able to get a guy like that, this isn't like usually when you find a guy like that in the 5th round, he's 5'8", 185 pounds, soaking wet, right? And he can't, or he's 6'1" and he runs a 4.8. Like this guy, like is a legitimate NFL corner that it just feels like the rest of the NFL completely missed on because he didn't go to he went to Fresno State as opposed to Ohio State, and. Right. I think that, yeah, it's a situation where this isn't a fluke. Like we watched it from OTAs to training camp to early regular season to late regular season. The progression was steady and it was in one direction. And so to me, I have a lot of faith that we're going to come back next year. DaRon Bland is going to be an even better corner than he was previous to this. I have faith in I'm probably calling him CB2 right now as far as I'm concerned.
And that's what I was just going to say is Trevon Diggs is cornerback 1. Bland is cornerback 2. Not sure exactly where he's going to play, whether in the slot or on the outside. That's probably going to depend on cornerback 3, which the Cowboys are hoping comes from the next group of players that we're going to discuss. All right, Landon, let's talk about the rest of the cornerbacks on the roster. And this is where it gets tricky. Let's start with Kelvin Joseph, the second, or I guess he's the 3rd-year player now out of Kentucky, a 2nd-round pick in the 2021 draft. What's going on here?
Look, I tended to think that Kelvin actually played some decent football when he had a chance to kind of get plugged in. I don't know that he was necessarily, he gave up some plays, obviously, but there was going to be a learning curve with him. Like there was going to be a point where he's going to have to be thrown into the game and he's going to have to take his lumps a little bit, just because he needed that level of development. He has, again, I'm just going to say it, he has natural cover ability that is extremely rare. His movement skill, his ability to kind of keep with it when guys are moving around. Like when it looks right with Kelvin Joseph, it looks extremely right. But the problem is consistency. The problem is, a lot of what a cornerback does is not just like match guys, like read their hips and shadow them and mirror them, but reading the routes they're running as they're running the route so they can anticipate, oh, okay, he's slowing down at the top of his break. That means he's either going to break back in, break outside, but he's not going to run past me. It's understanding route running to the degree that you can read what the player is doing. I don't think that Joseph is anywhere near there yet. Like, I think that's where he's struggling. He has so much natural kind of mirroring ability that saved him throughout college. But now that you're in the NFL, you got professional route runners, who make all their stims look exactly the same. So it takes a lot of nuance. I think that he lacks the nuance right now. He has the ability. The question is, will he ever become reliable enough to kind of avail himself and then kind of get on the field long enough to continue to develop the skills? That's the problem I have with Joseph right now. He's an incredible special teams player. I don't have a problem getting him on the roster. What I have a problem with is getting him on the field and having him play reliably enough that he can continue to stay on the field so that he can get the development he needs. Because I think that's where the issue is. He needs playing time, but if I can't put him on the field because I can't trust him, then it's hard to develop him.
I think you nailed it. Like, there's just a lack of playing time. So he's a 2-year NFL pro coming from 2 different colleges. How many total coverage snaps do you think he has between the NFL regular season, preseason, and in college?
300, maybe 400, maybe.
Yeah, it's his total snaps are 595 on defense. Oh, in college, preseason, in the NFL.
I understand I undercut that, but that's because I knew it was low. And so, yeah, I mean, that's still insanely low. Like, that's just not a very high amount of experience,
But you're right. Like, in order for him to get more experience, the coaches have to trust him. They've got to see it in practice. They've got to see some maturity there. Like, I'm not saying this didn't happen, but it does sound like there's some rumors that still maybe struggling to be on time and to, do all that kind of stuff.
Details, right?
Yeah.
Details. It's that
Now,
stuff that you feel like you worry about with him.
he's still only 22 years old, and
That's the
maybe
other
going into year 3, things will flip for him because this is probably it for him. Like, I know his rookie contract runs through 2024, but if it doesn't happen by the end of year 3, I don't think the Cowboys are doing this experiment again.
Yeah, I mean, especially what we've already been through. We don't need to go into all the off-field stuff and all that, but it's like, if we're not getting something out of this, and look, I think he's the part that he's kind of earned himself on is his special teams play has been fantastic.
Yeah, he's actually an asset there now.
We should mention that. Now that's not why you draft a guy in the second round, but I will say that, like, we're getting some value out of having him on a game day roster, so that's at least something. But you really need him to kind of drill down on the specifics of it, because you need him to be able to get on the field in order to develop into the player that you hope that he can become.
Yeah, 4th highest graded special teams player in all the NFL last year, according to Pro Football Focus. So you're right. Let's talk about Nahshon Wright, another cornerback that the Cowboys drafted in the 3rd round of the 2021 draft. I thought as a rookie there was some really good signs, especially in training camp and preseason. This year, it seemed like he took a step back. Are you still optimistic about Nahshon?
I think he's at a crossroads, right? I think Nahshon's kind of the opposite of Kelvin Joseph, where he doesn't have the kind of physical tools that are commonly associated with a man mirroring kind of cornerback. He is very much the zone corner, long, and what it means for those guys is that he has to be super on top of his technique, like he really has to be the cerebral player to use those gadgets in such a way to be able to kind of cut off passing lanes, close windows, and look, if there are going to be times when, if you're Nahshon Wright, the guy gets past you and you don't have the speed to kind of keep up with some of these smaller, quicker guys. So you've got to find a way to anticipate the route running in order to buy yourself the most time before a guy can kind of run past you, give your pass rush the most time to get home before the ball gets thrown. And for Wright, that means that he's going to need to become even more physical at the line of scrimmage. Yeah. He's got to find a way to take advantage of that body type.
He's got to bulk up too. Like, he needs to gain a good 15.
Well, those go hand in hand to me, right? Like, the problem is that you're a big corner, but you got to play like a big corner because you can't.
He plays like he's 5'9", 185 pounds sometimes, right? Like, you just can't do that.
And it works at times in training camp. You see it. He gets back. He comes off of his man in zone and he makes a play that a normal 6-foot corner is not going to make. Right. But you need him to really kind of start playing into his body a little bit better in order to kind of unlock his skill set, because he's just not going to be able to play off man coverage and keep up with some of these bigger or smaller wide receivers. He's just, he needs to disrupt the stem. He needs to stop the route at the line of scrimmage, get him off rhythm with his quarterback, and then look back at the ball, use those levers while he's close to the man to knock the ball away. If he's off coverage and he's giving these guys all this space to operate, he doesn't have the quick twitch to gear up to get to these guys, and he doesn't have the kind of agility to have reactive athleticism to, like, someone like Tyreek Hill, like, running a sluggo, so he's got to find a way to use the skills that he's got, which are considerable, but it's a little bit like his game is a little bit mismatched with his skill set. And I think if he can unify that a little bit, and I agree, putting on 10 to 15 pounds, like making him a little bit more physically intimidating, I think that will do wonders for his game.
The other thing is, if he needs to be a better special teams player. Like, that's one thing that Joseph is so much better than Nahshon Wright, is he's really locked down one of those gunner rules. I think Nahshon just needs to get better there, because if he can, let's say, overtake CJ Goodwin, who the Cowboys have been trying to get rid of for 15 years and keeps coming back on the roster.
Can't stop him.
At some point, now you have some value there, right? Now you can hang on the roster as the quarterback, corner 4 or 5 and whatever. But I think if he's not going to be a special teams guy, and the play is only so on defense, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cowboys move on.
If the Cowboys could somehow fuse these two players
I
into
know.
a Kelvin Wright, then
Yeah.
you may have the best cornerback in the NFL. But the problem is you got two guys who are on opposite ends of the spectrum who kind of represent two different sides of the problem. You need one of these two to please figure this out this year.
But before we go, the Cowboys are obviously going to add a corner or two this offseason. Would you prefer they do it early in the draft, middle in the draft, or in free agency?
I think I prefer the draft. I don't know that I want to say necessarily, or I mean, let's say early, meaning early being
Like for
day
top
1 and
100.
day 2. Like, yeah. So I would say early in the draft. I think that they're probably are going to, I haven't looked terribly deep into the free agent market for corners, but I imagine that there could be some nice stopgap situations there that you might be interested in. I know that isn't Shaquille Griffin available? There's some guys that have some history with.
I'll run down the names really quickly. Okay.
Yeah.
Jamal Dean's going to get paid a ton. James Bradbury played a ton. Patrick Peterson.
He played better football than I expected him to play last year. So maybe.
Rock Ya-Sin, Marcus Peters, Sean Murphy Bunting, Eli Apple.
No. I mean, Marcus Peters, like, you can't have Marcus Peters on the same team that Trevon Diggs is. Like, I don't know. You got to have one, kind of not feast or famine corner on that team, right?
Now, I wouldn't mind taking a shot on somebody like Shaquille Griffin, or you mentioned like Sean Murphy Bunting, just because he's fairly young. But
Bunting was the guy that I was gonna say. Yeah,
but it's the draft for me, right? Like, I think this team can afford to draft a cornerback in the top 100 in one of the best and deepest cornerback classes I've ever seen. If you could add a guy like, I know you like Joey Porter Jr. a lot. I like Cam Smith a lot. One of those caliber of cornerbacks. Now we're talking about this being a really good positional group to potentially lead. And that's how maybe this defense goes to another level.
Yeah. And, listen, I also don't think that we should discount the play. Not that you were, and we'll talk about him more, I'm sure, in a couple days. But the play of Israel Mukuamu when he was reduced down into the corner as part of a just dire need situation during the last run. Mukuamu played incredible football. Whether we want to talk about him being a safety, whether we want to talk about him being a corner, this is another one of these guys who, you want to talk about saving the season. I think Mukuamu's play at the end of the year allowed DaRon Bland to do what he was doing. He filled in the gaps, right? Yeah. And he did so at an incredibly high level. I look for Mukuamu to take a step next year. I think that not necessarily a move to cornerback, but this is someone that we should consider when we're talking about the cornerback room, because I do think he will see snaps as a nickelback that will help alleviate some of the stuff. So what you may end up seeing sometimes as your starting nickel defense is Mukuamu as your nickelback, Bland on the outside, and then obviously Diggs on the other side.
You know how much I love Israel Mukuamu, so that's more than fine by me. More Izzy for me, please. That is it for today's show. Thank you guys for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Now make your second listen the Locked On NFL Draft Show. Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into the sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for listening to the show. Go check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you guys next time.